Greetings! I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to build this 28mm scale KV-1/KV-2 heavy tank kit in plastic by Warlord Games. This is a relatively new release from Warlord Games, and as soon as I heard about it, I knew I had to have it. The plastic tank in this kit is made by Italeri, and you can buy it in Iteleri's own packaging, but you won't get any of the extra things that come in this Warlord box. As you can see, the box art primarily features the KV-1. You probably won't be surprised to hear that I'm more interested in the KV-2. The back of the box has a couple of short paragraphs about the KV tanks and some images of all the things you can build with this kit, including 8 tank riders, which are really handy for a Soviet army. You want as many bodies as you can get if you're a Soviet commander. You can also see the included vehicle cards, decals, and damage markers. Inside the box we have this instruction booklet. This looks quite good. It's an actual booklet, and right there on the first page it lets us know that we can build both the KV-1 and KV-2 turrets with this kit, which is excellent. These instructions are much better than those found in other Warlord tank kits that I've built. They're clear and easy to follow. There's a painting guide at the back which, while not comprehensive, should be helpful. The only problem is that, unless I'm missing it, they don't tell you what brand of paint the numbers refer to. It might be Italeri, but I think it could be Vallejo. Who knows? Someone, I guess. Moving on. There's also an instruction leaflet for the included infantry, which is rather handy. Guessing how they go together might not end particularly well. Speaking of infantry, this kit comes with 1 sprue of bodies and assorted body parts, 1 sprue of weapons, and some bases, including a pill-shaped base, which is nice. The Soviet infantry box I bought a while ago didn't have any of these, and I had to contact Warlord to get them. Because I've already done a video about these infantry figures, I won't be building them in this video. There's a link to the build video of those Soviet infantry in the description if you want to see it. There are vehicle cards for both the KV-1 and KV-2. I quite like these. They not only look good, but they've got a bunch of helpful information so you don't have to flip through the rulebook when you forget things about the tank. I don't know about you, but for me it's a case of when I forget, not if. And of course there's a decal sheet. This is pretty nice. There's a bunch of slogans, some numbers, and even markings to build a captured German version and a Finnish version. At least I think that's what that swastika is. I might be wrong. It's happened before. Next we have these damage markers. Fortunately they come in a baggie. I imagine those fibres would get everywhere if they were loose. I probably won't use these, but I do think it's a really nice inclusion, and I would like to see more of this kind of little bonus. The sprues for the tank come wrapped nicely in protective plastic. There are 2 sprues with all the parts that you'll need to build a KV-1 or a KV-2. The details are really quite nice and sharp. There isn't much in the way of mould lines, and I couldn't find any casting errors. This level of quality is about what I would expect of Iteleri's plastic. That is to say, I expect good things, and I'm not disappointed. There's a tank commander included in this kit. He's got his arms folded and looks very disapproving. Let's put this thing together. As the instructions suggest, I'm going to start this by assembling the tracks. First, I glue on the drive sprocket. This part is keyed to ensure it goes on properly. Be sure you choose the correct part though, otherwise the sprocket teeth will face backwards, which is the wrong way. They should face in towards the road wheels. Next comes the idler wheel. It doesn't have teeth, so it doesn't matter which way it faces and it won't bite. Now it needs some tracks. I added the upper section of track first, though I suppose it doesn't matter if you want to do the bottom one first. You do you. This part has some keying to ensure it both sits on the wheels properly and it goes on the correct side of the tank. It's slotted into place nice and easily. I applied pressure for a moment to ensure a good bond. I then glued the end parts of the tracks on. This is simple enough, but be sure to use the correct part for each end. The rear one doesn't quite seem to sit right, but it doesn't look too bad. The front one does have a little bit of a gap that the skirting, mudguardy bit on the hull doesn't really hide. The gaps aren't huge, but they are there. It could be hidden with mud later anyway if it really bothers you. The bottom section of track is just as easy to attach as the top one. There are guides to ensure a correct fit here too. I rather like the way these are designed. They're pretty effective. So that's one track. The other track is built in the same way, only different parts are used, obviously. Let's attach these to the hull. This has guide slots that make this a very simple process. Add some glue and slot the part into place, making sure the wall on the track part doesn't sit above the wall on the hull part. Apply a little pressure, repeat the step for the track on the other side, and this is the result. Very tracky. Next comes the whole rear. There's keying to ensure this goes into place correctly too. This is simple, no issues here. Look at that KV butt. Next come the lift and I assume towing shackles. These slot into the holes provided very easily, though a little nudging might be required. I think they look pretty good. I then attach the shackles to the rear hull. The instructions suggest leaving these for later, but I couldn't see a reason to do so, and because I'm such a rebel, I put them on now. Here's a tip, don't drop these on the floor. You'll waste a lot of time looking for them. Not that I would do such a thing, of course, just thought I would say. I then glue the top of the hull into place. The instructions say this should go on after adding the details, but continuing my rebelliousness, I decided to disregard this and glue it on now. I couldn't see any reason why I shouldn't. I apply a bit of pressure to ensure a good fit, though it's not really needed, and thanks to the overlapping parts there are no visible gaps. Very nice. Now to add the details. There are quite a few. Let's start with the big ones. I glue on these stowage boxes. These are simple to attach here. The rounded edge of the box should face out away from the hull. These are an optional part. I chose to use all three for reasons. Next, I glue on the exhausts. They go into place facing outward like so. These are keyed to prevent them from being attached wrong, though if you really want to, you could still put them on backwards. I'm not sure why you would unless you're some kind of backwards exhaust weirdo. Moving forward, I attach the driver's hatch. This could be modelled open, but as I usually do, I'm modelling this tank button down. It didn't fit into the hole with the hinge part still on, so I had to cut it off. The result is a little bit messy, though not too bad. This is a reminder to test fit parts before gluing them. Next, I attach the driver's periscope. This goes on easily and is keyed to ensure you don't put it on backwards and give the driver a nice view of the turret. That would be silly. Continuing with vision for the driver, I attach this forward vision device. It goes on quite easily. The slot should be in the lower part of this cover. Next, the machine gun housing. This is simple to install. Not much else to say about it really. Then comes this thing, which I believe is the horn. This was a little bit fiddly to get into place, but I did eventually get there with the help of tweezers. I followed that with the headlamp. This was much easier to install. To finish the hull, I add the machine gun barrel to the housing. This part is tiny, and I would suggest using tweezers here unless you have teeny tiny fingers. I don't. A little bit of nudging and fiddling about and it's in place, and that's the hull completed. Very hully, is what I would say if I were a New Zealander describing a hilly place. Sorry. Moving on to the turrets. I've decided to start with the KV-2 turret because I like that version better. I start this by slotting the gun mantlet through the turret front part. It should sit this way up. Don't put it in upside down. This part can be left unglued so it elevates and depresses, but since I'm not interested in having my model do that, I glue it into place. I tried to install this backing part of the gun, but it didn't quite seem to fit. This is what you will need to glue on if you want a movable gun. You'll need to be much more careful with the glue if you want the gun to be movable. It might be that the parts are mislabeled and this is in fact the part for the KV-1. I don't know. I didn't try both parts because I didn't feel like it was necessary for my purposes. The glue will hold the part in just fine. The gun can then be glued in. It's keyed so it only goes in one way, though it doesn't really seem to be necessary on a gun with no muzzle brake. But it does ensure the mould lines are along the top and bottom of the barrel. Those mould lines were quite easy to clean up. I think you'll agree it looks very derp. Now to assemble the body of the turret. This is a little bit fiddly. The guides on the backs of the parts help, but they're not very big and it's still possible to attach the parts at the wrong angle. The way I got around that was to glue the rear wall on after the side wall. That way I can see if I've got all the parts lined up nicely at the proper angle. Then the other wall and roof can be added. It's not especially challenging, just a little bit fiddly. Bigger guide parts on the back might make it easier, but this works fine. I then add the gun and front wall assembly, making sure to wipe away any excess glue I've spilled by being a numpty, and it's starting to look like a KV-2 turret. There are a few slight gaps at the join points, but this is a Soviet tank, and gaps are a sign of good strong Soviet workmanship. More details need to be added before this turret is complete. First I added the hatch. There's a slot for the hinge part of this so I didn't have to cut it off like the driver's hatch. Next come the periscopes. These go on easily and are keyed so you can't do it wrong. The rear-facing periscope is a different part that's shaped so that it will clear the raised square on the roof here. Now all it needs is a machine gun. I glue the housing into place. This part needed a little bit of cleanup to fit properly, but after that it fits great. Then I add the MG barrel. I was able to use my fat fingers here because there are no protrusions to stop them. That shall certainly help to enforce the no krauts climbing on the KV-2 rule. Maybe there should be a keep off sign too. So that's the KV-2 turret completed. Now to assemble the significantly less derpy KV-1 turret. Like the other turret, I start by gluing the mantlet into place like so. I didn't bother trying to install the back part of this mantlet because the glue is enough for my purposes. The gun is also keyed, though still, it's not really necessary. I like that the end of the barrel has a hole in it, saving me the effort of drilling it out. It's not as awesome as the huge derp gun of the KV-2, but it still looks good. While the glue on that sets, it's time to build the rest of the turret's structure. This is slightly easier than with the KV-2 turret, though there is still the same minor issue with getting the parts lined up at the correct angles. I do like that the roof and rear wall are a single part for this turret. It makes things a little bit easier. The gun assembly can then be glued into the obvious location, the front. It looks pretty good to me. I then add the commander's hatch. I like that it actually has some detail on the inside, which I forgot to show with the KV-2 turret. This is really good if you do want to model it open. Next come the periscopes. There are 4 of these and they're all keyed so they can easily be positioned facing the right directions. Nothing especially hard about this. The KV-1 also has a no climbing policy and thus needs a machine gun to enforce that, so I install it. It goes on just as easily as the one on the KV-2. I've placed the barrel facing downwards so it looks consistent with its housing. And finally, I install these grab handle things. They were a little bit fiddly to install and I don't especially like the way they look. I think they're a little bit too chunky, but it's not a huge deal really. I probably won't actually use the KV-1 turret as much as the KV-2 turret. Either way, that's the entire kit finished. The turrets are simple to attach using the locking tabs that hold them in place. No magnets necessary. Unfortunately, I don't have any other KVs in this scale to compare this model with, but I am confident that this is a much better model than Warlord's resin versions. I really like this kit. I haven't built any models for a couple of months, and this was a great way to get back into the swing of things. None of the parts were missing, and the kit went together easily and relatively quickly, and I only had to do a bare minimum of mold line removal. I had no issues following the instructions, which were nice and clear and very well laid out, and I think the result is a very nice representation of both the KV-1 and KV-2 that will look excellent when painted. My only complaints are the gaps. They're not too bad in the turrets, and it's not at all unrealistic for Soviet tanks of that era to have gaps. But the gaps in the tracks, while pretty minor gaps that you actually have to look for, might bug some. Easily covered with mud though if you're really bothered by them. I really like that this kit allows you to build both turrets. It's always a disappointment when you get a kit that can build multiple vehicles, but doesn't have enough parts to actually do so. I know a lot of gamers, myself included, like to be able to field different vehicles with a minimum of effort and especially cost. I also think the cards that come with this kit are great, and I would love to be able to buy cards for every vehicle you can field in Blot Action. Maybe they already have that and I just can't find it, but it seems to me they've not made such cards available yet. If you're not worried about the extras like cards, smoke markers, or tank rider figures, this kit is also available through Italeri in their own packaging. I've not checked the pricing, but I imagine that one would be slightly cheaper. It's always a good idea to shop around and choose the kit that best fits your needs. I think this model is quite good. What do you think? Let me know in the comments section below. And of course, don't forget to do things like subscribing here on YouTube or following me on social media if you want to. Check the links in the description. If you really like the things I do, please consider helping to support the channel over at Patreon. Patrons get to see my videos a bit early, along with some patron-only bonus content. I shall return soon, so until then, happy modelling and thanks for watching. Farewell.